The Royal Challenge. The galaxy was vast, filled with stars, planets, and civilizations far beyond human comprehension. In the heart of this vast empire, the ruler of the most powerful kingdom sat upon his throne, a king unlike any other. His name was King Zaran, and his empire stretched across countless worlds. Yet, there was one thing that mattered most to him, his daughter, Princess Alina. Princess Alina was no ordinary royal. She was known throughout the galaxy for her beauty, wisdom, and grace. Many suitors from across the stars had begged for her hand in marriage, but none had won the king's approval. The princess, for her part, cared little for politics or royal duties. She longed for something more, true love, a partner who would understand her, someone who wasn't just seeking her title, but her heart. The king had watched his daughter grow up, and he knew it was time for her to marry. He needed someone who could carry on his legacy, someone strong enough to rule beside her. The decision wasn't just about love, it was about the future of his empire. But no one seemed worthy of the princess. In a moment of frustration, King Zaran called for a royal challenge. He sent word to the galaxy's farthest reaches, announcing the grand test that would determine who could marry his daughter. His proclamation was clear. Who dares to marry my daughter? Only the strongest, the bravest, and the most worthy may even try. Prove yourself, or leave my daughter be. The message was sent through every communication channel, traveling from planet to planet, from one star system to another. It reached the ears of many powerful beings, warriors, kings, queens, and diplomats. They all heard the challenge. But none dared step forward. The idea of marrying a royal princess was tempting, but the trials set by King Zaran were legendary. His kingdom's laws were harsh, and the challenges were said to be impossible. No one wanted to risk their life for the mere chance of becoming a consort to a princess. The king's words echoed in the cosmos, his challenge hanging like a heavy cloud over the galaxy. Days turned into weeks, and no one had answered the king's call. The king grew more frustrated. How could no one want his daughter? How could no one be brave enough to face the trials of his empire? Was there no one in the galaxy worthy? Then, one day, a message arrived. It wasn't from a powerful alien warlord or a famous prince. It wasn't from any of the well-known beings who had made names for themselves across the galaxy. The message was simple, short, and came from a place no one had expected, Earth. The king's advisors were puzzled. Who would be foolish enough to send a message from a planet so far out in the galaxy, a planet that was barely known to the galaxy's elites? And who was the person behind this message? The king ordered the transmission to be sent to him immediately. The message read, I, Jack, a human from Earth, accept your challenge. I may not be the strongest, nor the most powerful, but I will try. I only ask for a chance to prove myself. Send me your trials, and I will face them. The king sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the message. A human? From Earth? He had never heard of this person. This was no warlord or hero from the stars. This was a human, a species that had only just begun to explore the stars. Yet here was someone willing to face the trials, to take on the impossible challenge. The king's advisors were shocked. Your Majesty, this is absurd. A human? They are nothing compared to the great warriors of the galaxy, one of them protested. But King Zaran, for the first time in weeks, felt a flicker of interest. Perhaps this was a trick, or maybe the human was truly foolish. But something inside him told him to let the challenge continue. He had given his word, and no matter how small or weak this human seemed, the king could not back down. He would let Jack face the trials, and if he failed, it would be a fitting end. And so, with that decision, the king's challenge grew even greater. He summoned his royal guards and instructed them to prepare for the arrival of this strange earthling. They would face the trials of his kingdom, and only if Jack survived would he earn the right to marry Princess Alina. The king's wrath. Jack's message had stirred something deep within King Zaran. He had always believed that the strong should rule, and he had spent his life cultivating a kingdom that was built on strength and power. The galaxy had its rules, and those who could not abide by them were cast aside. But here was a human, a species considered weak and insignificant, daring to challenge those rules. As Jack's message was received and the preparations were made, the king paced restlessly in his grand hall. He couldn't help but feel a strange sense of curiosity mixed with anger. How could this human think he could face the might of his kingdom? When the royal ship arrived, carrying Jack from the distant planet of Earth, the king stood at the grand balcony of his palace, overlooking the vast courtyard below. The towering gates of the palace opened slowly, and Jack stepped out from the ship, dressed in simple clothes. His appearance stood in stark contrast to the extravagant armor and uniforms of the royal guards who stood at attention. Jack was unarmed, vulnerable, yet there was a certain calm in his demeanor. He didn't look like a hero, but there was a fire in his eyes, a fire that piqued the king's interest. "Is this the human who dares challenge me?" King Zoran muttered, his voice thick with disdain. "He looks like nothing more than a commoner." Jack was escorted into the heart of the royal palace, where the king awaited him in his grand throne room. The walls were adorned with alien tapestries, each telling the story of past battles, past conquests, of the blood that had been spilled to keep this empire strong. Jack's eyes moved over the room, taking in the sights, yet his thoughts remained focused on one thing, the princess. The king's throne was high, set above everyone else, and it gleamed with a golden hue, reflecting the light of the massive chandeliers overhead. As Jack stood before him, the king's cold gaze fixed on him. "Tell me, human," the king began, his voice booming across the room, "why do you believe you are worthy of my daughter? What makes you think you can stand against the trials of my empire? You are nothing. Your people are nothing. You have no strength, no power. You are a speck in the galaxy, a dot on the map." Jack stood tall, unflinching in the face of the king's harsh words. "I may not have strength like your warriors," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But I have something you can't measure, determination. I'm here to prove that even the smallest of us can do the impossible, even if I have to face every challenge you throw at me." The king's eyes narrowed. This human was bold, far bolder than any of the others who had sought the princess's hand in the past. It was almost amusing. And yet, the king had never been one to show weakness. "You speak of determination," the king sneered. "Very well. You will face the trials, and we shall see if your determination is enough to save you." Jack nodded, not backing down. He had come this far, and he would face whatever lay ahead. The king raised his hand, signaling for the royal herald to announce the first trial. A deep, echoing voice filled the room. "The first trial, to be faced by the human challenger, is the trial of strength," the herald proclaimed. "He will face the great beast of Zarin, a creature of unimaginable power, known for tearing apart even the most powerful warriors. If he survives, he will move on to the next trial. If he fails, he will be cast into the depths of the arena, never to return." The room fell silent. Jack's heart pounded, but he stood his ground. The great beast of Zarin was no legend, it was a creature that had torn apart armies, warriors, and kings. Many had entered the arena to face it, but none had ever returned. But Jack didn't flinch. He had come to this world to prove that courage and heart could outweigh even the fiercest monster. The king's laugh echoed through the throne room. "You'll need more than courage, human," he said, "you'll need a miracle." Jack wasn't interested in the king's words. His mind was already focused on the trial ahead. He would face the beast, and he would fight with everything he had. The royal guards led him to the arena, a massive, open space surrounded by towering walls. The crowd's murmur filled the air as Jack stepped into the center. His eyes scanned the surroundings, large stone pillars, dark shadows stretching across the arena floor. And then, the ground began to shake. A roar like thunder echoed through the air, and the ground cracked open. From the depths of the earth, the great beast of Zarin emerged, its eyes glowing like molten lava, its fangs dripping with venom. Its massive claws tore into the ground as it growled, ready to strike. The king watched from the balcony above, his eyes filled with both amusement and disbelief. Could this human survive this? Could anyone? Jack stood firm, his breath steady, his body ready. The creature charged, its roar deafening, but Jack's eyes locked onto its massive form, his heart thumping with purpose. The fight had just begun, and Jack was determined to prove the king wrong. He would face this beast, not with strength alone, but with the will to survive. The trials of worth. The great beast of Zarin roared in fury, its eyes burning with an ancient hatred as it lunged towards Jack. The crowd in the stands gasped as the ground trembled beneath the beast's powerful movements. This was no mere creature, it was a force of nature, a predator capable of ending Jack's life in a single strike. But Jack stood still, his gaze fixed on the beast, his hands clenched into fists. He could feel the weight of the moment, the eyes of the entire galaxy watching him, waiting for him to fail. But Jack wasn't going to fail. Not today. As the beast charged, Jack did the unthinkable, he ducked. The creature's claws sliced through the air above him, missing by inches, but the force of the blow sent a shockwave through the ground. The crowd roared in surprise, some of them unsure whether to cheer or gasp in disbelief. A human had just avoided the strike of the great beast. Jack didn't stop to look at the crowd. He was focused entirely on the creature before him. With every step, the beast grew angrier, its movements becoming more erratic. But Jack knew something it didn't, the beast's rage made it predictable. He had no strength to match it, no massive claws or armored hide. But he had something more important, his wits. He waited, watching, breathing in and out as he kept himself calm. His eyes followed every movement, every twitch of the beast's muscles. When it charged again, Jack sprinted to the side, narrowly avoiding another crushing strike. The beast's roar echoed as it slid to a halt, frustrated. Jack was quick, and in the blink of an eye, he darted under the creature's massive frame, sliding beneath its belly. He could hear the beast's heavy breaths, feel the heat radiating from its body. Without hesitation, Jack grabbed a sharp stone from the ground and drove it upwards into the creature's exposed underbelly. A howl of pain erupted from the beast, and for a moment, it stumbled. Jack didn't wait for it to recover. He pushed himself to his feet, now fully aware that the creature's power wasn't just physical, it was in its confidence. The moment that confidence wavered, it was vulnerable. The crowd gasped, some of them rising to their feet as the beast began to stagger. King Zaran's eyes narrowed, his expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. "This cannot be," he muttered to himself. "No one has ever done this before. No one." The creature, now enraged beyond reason, charged at Jack once more. But this time, Jack was ready. He didn't fight it head-on. Instead, he used its momentum against it. As the beast closed the gap, Jack rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the beast's attack, and the creature crashed into a stone pillar with a sickening thud. The crowd erupted in applause, their astonished voices filling the air. Jack's heart raced, but he didn't have time to celebrate. The creature was still alive, and Jack knew it would come after him again. But now, the tables had turned. The beast had been wounded, its pride shattered. Jack had shown it that it could be defeated. The creature, struggling to rise from the rubble, let out one final, guttural roar. Jack, without hesitation, grabbed a nearby spear, one that had been left behind by the previous challengers. He rushed forward, his heart pounding in his chest, and with a swift motion, drove the spear deep into the beast's side. The great beast of Zarin let out a final, agonized cry before collapsing to the ground, dead. Silence fell over the arena. For a long moment, no one moved, no one spoke. It wasn't just the beast that had been slain, it was the very idea that humans were weak and powerless. Jack had proven that with courage and intelligence, a human could face what no other being dared to. And he had won. The king stood up from his throne, his face pale with disbelief. He had never expected this outcome. No one had ever bested the great beast of Zarin, no one except Jack, the human from Earth. Finally, the king's voice broke the silence. "Incredible," he said, his voice thick with grudging respect. "You have shown more than I expected, human. But this is only the beginning. The trials will not get easier. If you survive this, there will be more challenges, greater and deadlier. Do you still wish to proceed?" Jack, covered in the beast's blood, stood tall. He didn't hesitate. "I came here for one reason," he said, his voice steady. "To prove that I am worthy. And I won't stop until I've done that." The king's expression shifted from anger to something else, curiosity, perhaps even admiration. "Then you are a fool," he said, "but a brave one. Very well. The second trial awaits." As Jack was led away from the arena, the crowd's cheers continued to echo in his ears. He had survived the first trial, but the journey was far from over. With every challenge he faced, Jack knew that the stakes would only rise. But he was determined to keep going. The prize, the hand of Princess Alina, was worth any risk, any sacrifice. And perhaps, just perhaps, the human heart was stronger than anyone had ever given it credit for. The princess's secret. The roar of the crowd echoed in Jack's ears long after the great beast of Zarin had fallen. He was led away from the arena, his body sore, covered in the creature's blood. The royal guards walked beside him, their stern expressions betraying no emotion, but Jack could feel their gazes following him, some of them tinged with disbelief. He had done the impossible. He had survived. As he was escorted through the palace halls, Jack's thoughts turned to the next trial. The king's words echoed in his mind, "If you survive this, there will be more challenges, greater and deadlier." He had no illusions about what lay ahead. The trials were designed to break him, to crush his spirit and force him to quit. But Jack wouldn't quit, not now, not when he had come this far. He was led into a small, quiet room, far from the sounds of the cheering crowds. It was dark, save for the soft glow of a single lamp hanging from the ceiling. Jack sat down on a wooden chair, wiping the sweat and blood from his face. He was exhausted, but there was no time to rest. The second trial awaited. But before Jack could gather his thoughts, the door opened quietly, and a figure stepped inside. It was Princess Alina. She entered the room, her footsteps light but purposeful. Her long, silver hair cascaded down her back, and her eyes, normally cold and unapproachable, were filled with something Jack hadn't seen before, concern. She looked at him, and for a moment, the two stood in silence, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. "You're still alive," she said, her voice softer than Jack expected. There was a hint of surprise in her tone, but also something else. A deeper understanding. Jack, still catching his breath, gave her a tired smile. "You seem surprised. You didn't think I'd make it?" Princess Alina hesitated before speaking again. "I've seen many challengers fail. Some didn't even survive the first trial. But you're different." Jack raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "Different how?" Alina stepped closer, lowering her voice so that only Jack could hear. "The truth is, I didn't come here by choice. My father, he set this challenge to see if any man could pass his trials. But I'm not just some prize to be won. I have a duty to my people, a duty to my kingdom. I've always known that. But there's something about you, Jack. Something that's not like the others." Jack listened intently, sensing the seriousness in her words. "What do you mean?" Alina looked around the room, her expression clouding with worry. "You're the first person who hasn't been blinded by power or status. You came here with no expectations, no desire for glory. You only want to prove something, something I don't think you fully understand yet." Jack frowned. "What's that?" Alina stepped closer, her voice lowering to a whisper. "The king, my father, is not what he seems. He rules with fear, with absolute power. But there's something else at play here, something you're not seeing. The trials are not just about proving strength, they're about control. If you win, Jack, it won't just be my hand you'll gain. My father will use you, just like he's used others before. He'll make you a puppet, a figurehead to secure his power. I can't let that happen. Jack felt a chill run through him. He had come here to prove himself, to show that humans weren't weak, that they could stand tall in the face of impossible odds. But now, hearing Alina's words, a new understanding began to form in his mind. This wasn't just about winning her hand, it was about something much bigger, something that could affect the entire galaxy. You're saying my father's trials aren't just to test my worth? Alina continued, her eyes filled with sadness. They're meant to break me, to control me. And once you win, you'll be a tool in his hands. Jack looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He had no idea how deep this situation ran, how much was at stake. He hadn't just entered a contest for the princess's hand, he had unknowingly stepped into the middle of a political game that could affect the fate of entire worlds. I'm not interested in being anyone's puppet, Jack said firmly, his resolve hardening. I came here to win, but not for power. Not for glory. I came here because I believe in something more. And if your father is using this challenge to manipulate people, then I'm not going to let him win. Alina's gaze softened, and for the first time, Jack saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. I knew you were different, she whispered. That's why I had to warn you. The next trial is dangerous. Not just physically, but mentally. It will test your very soul. If you survive that, then you may stand a chance. But you have to promise me something, Jack. Don't let him break you. Jack nodded. He didn't fully understand the weight of Alina's warning, but he knew one thing for sure, he couldn't back down now. Not with the princess's life, and his own, on the line. I promise, he said quietly. With that, Alina turned and left the room, her footsteps echoing in the silence. Jack sat back, lost in thought. The trials had just begun, but now, more than ever, he knew that what he was fighting for was far greater than anything he had imagined. It wasn't just about winning the princess's hand, it was about surviving, about uncovering the truth behind the king's power, and about fighting for a future where freedom, not control, reigned supreme. The princess's choice. The next trial loomed over Jack like a shadow, darker and more dangerous than the last. He had barely had time to rest before he was summoned to the royal chamber, where King Zoran awaited him. The palace felt colder now, the halls filled with the weight of unseen eyes, watching his every move. The stakes were higher than ever. Jack couldn't stop thinking about what Alina had said. The princess's warning echoed in his mind as he was led down the long corridors of the palace, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Don't let him break you. Those words were no longer just a warning, they were a challenge. Jack had known from the beginning that these trials would be difficult, but now, he understood that it wasn't just about surviving. It was about keeping his soul intact, not losing himself to the king's manipulations. When Jack entered the royal chamber, King Zoran was seated upon his throne, his expression unreadable. The throne room was massive, the walls adorned with trophies of war, each one a symbol of the king's brutal reign. It was a room built to intimidate, and it worked. But Jack had learned to tune out the noise, to focus on what really mattered. You've done well so far, human, King Zoran said, his voice booming across the room. But this next trial will test your mind, not just your body. If you fail, it will be the end of you. Jack didn't respond. He had heard threats like this before. Instead, he stood tall, his body sore but his resolve stronger than ever. Let's get this over with, Jack said. Zoran chuckled, a dark, knowing sound that made the hairs on the back of Jack's neck stand up. So eager, are we? Very well. The second trial begins now. The king's words echoed as a hidden door at the back of the room opened, revealing a series of complex, shifting stone pillars. Each pillar seemed to move and pulse with a strange energy, casting long shadows across the floor. Jack's eyes narrowed. This was no physical trial, this was something different. This is the trial of the mind, King Zoran explained. You must navigate the labyrinth of reflection. Within these walls, you will face illusions, your deepest fears, your greatest regrets, and your hidden desires. Only by facing them head-on can you survive. Fail to overcome them, and you will be lost forever. Jack stepped forward, his eyes scanning the shifting labyrinth. Each stone pillar seemed to shimmer and pulse with strange symbols, as if they were alive, as if they could read his thoughts. He took a deep breath, clearing his mind. This wasn't the first time he had faced his own demons. He had spent years fighting to survive on Earth, in a world that constantly told him he wasn't good enough. But what he didn't expect, what he couldn't have prepared for, were the images that started to appear in the labyrinth. The first vision came like a wave, crashing over him. It was an image of his mother, her face filled with fear. She was standing at the door of their small home, shouting at him to run, to escape. He could hear the sounds of footsteps behind him, soldiers, men with guns, looking for him. The scene played out, just like it had years ago, when Jack had barely escaped the violence that had torn his home apart. Jack tried to shake the vision away, but it grew stronger. He could feel the panic in his chest, the same helplessness that had washed over him as a child. He had run then, just as he had run from fear ever since. But now, standing in this trial, Jack knew he couldn't run anymore. He closed his eyes, focusing on his breathing. No more running. The vision shifted. Now, it was a different fear, his fear of failure, the fear of not being enough. He saw himself in front of the king, standing in the center of the arena, failing to defeat the beast. The crowd laughed at him, pointing fingers, mocking him. You are nothing, human. But Jack forced himself to stand tall, to take each insult, each doubt, and turn it into fuel. The vision began to fade, replaced by another. This time, it was the image of Princess Alina, crying in despair. You're not strong enough, she said, her voice filled with disappointment. Jack's heart tightened. He could feel the weight of her words, the pressure of her expectations, the fear of letting her down. He wanted to protect her, to be the man she believed he could be, but what if he wasn't? What if he failed her, too? The vision wavered, but Jack closed his eyes again, pushing past the doubts, the fears, the guilt. He had been running from his demons for so long, but this was different. This was his chance to face them. The images around him began to flicker, shifting like shadows. For a moment, Jack felt a surge of strength. He understood now. The trial wasn't about defeating these fears. It was about accepting them. When he opened his eyes, the labyrinth had changed. The illusions were gone, replaced by a single figure standing in front of him, the princess. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. You passed, she said softly. But now, the real trial begins. Jack stood still, his mind racing. What do you mean? Alina stepped forward, her eyes filled with something Jack couldn't quite place. You've faced your fears, but now you'll face the truth. The truth about me, about my father, about everything you've been fighting for. The king will not let you go easily, Jack. He will use you, whether you win or lose. But you still have a choice. Jack's heart raced. He hadn't expected this, hadn't known how deep the game went. But one thing was clear, Alina was no longer just a princess in a palace. She was part of something bigger, something darker. And now, Jack was tangled in it, too. You're not just fighting for my hand, Jack, she said, her voice trembling slightly. You're fighting for something much bigger. And I'm afraid that, by the end of this, we will both have to make a choice we never thought we would. Jack looked at her, his mind swirling with questions, but one thing remained clear, he couldn't back down now. The trials had only just begun, but they were about to take a turn neither Jack nor Alina could have predicted. Betrayal and sacrifice. Jack's mind raced after the conversation with Alina. The truth of the trials, her warnings, and the hidden dangers behind the king's empire weighed heavily on him. The trial had been more than just a test of strength or intellect, it had been a test of his very soul. Alina had said the real trial was yet to come, but Jack wasn't sure he was ready. How could he be? What choice did he really have? He was trapped in a palace filled with political games, where every decision could lead to his downfall. But one thing was clear now, his feelings for Alina were deeper than he had realized. He wasn't just here to prove his worth to the king, he was here to fight for her freedom, for her future, even if it meant facing the king's wrath head-on. That night, Jack sat in his room, contemplating his next move. The palace was eerily quiet, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. The door to his chamber creaked open, and Jack quickly rose to his feet. But it wasn't Alina who entered. It was a guard, dressed in dark robes, his face hidden behind a mask. He stepped forward, his voice low and urgent. "Come with me," the guard said, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "The princess needs you." "There's no time to explain." Jack's heart skipped a beat. Alina. She had never asked for his help so directly before. Something was wrong, he could feel it in his bones. Without a word, Jack followed the guard through the winding corridors of the palace. They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. As they passed a series of dimly lit chambers, Jack's mind raced. What could be happening? Why had Alina summoned him in secret? Was she in danger? They reached a hidden door at the far end of the palace, one that Jack hadn't seen before. The guard pushed it open, revealing a darkened room inside. Jack stepped in, his eyes adjusting to the low light. And there she was. Alina, standing at the center of the room, her expression grim. She looked at Jack, but there was no warmth in her gaze, no sign of the tenderness he had seen before. Instead, her eyes were filled with something darker, something colder. "Jack," she said quietly, her voice tight. "You need to leave. Now." Jack froze. "Leave? What are you talking about? What's going on?" Alina didn't answer immediately. She glanced over her shoulder, and Jack saw the figure of King Zoran's advisor, a tall, imposing man named Draxon, standing in the shadows. Draxon's eyes met Jack's, and Jack could see the cold calculation in them. Something wasn't right. "Alina, what's happening?" Jack asked, his voice rising with frustration. Alina stepped forward, her face filled with conflict. "The king. He knows about us. He knows what we're planning." Jack's heart sank. "What are we planning?" Alina hesitated before speaking, her voice breaking with emotion. "You were right, Jack. My father doesn't just want me to marry for power. He wants to control everything. He's already been pulling the strings behind the scenes. The trials weren't just about testing your worth, they were about testing your loyalty, your ability to submit. And I never should have involved you in this." Jack's chest tightened. "You think I've been playing his game?" He stepped closer to her. "Alina, I came here for you. I've always come here for you. I don't care about the trials, I care about stopping him. You know that." Alina's eyes flickered with doubt, but she shook her head. "No, Jack. You don't understand. There's no way out of this. He's already too powerful, and now, he's using me as leverage. He'll kill you, or worse, if you don't leave. He'll make an example of you." Jack could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him. Leave? It wasn't a choice he could make, not when so much was at stake. Not when his heart was tangled in this fight for her freedom. But there was something deeper at play. Something he hadn't anticipated. Betrayal. Draxon stepped forward, his shadow looming over the pair. "She's right, human. The king has decided. The trial is over. The princess is his, and you are nothing more than a pawn in this game. But your usefulness is at an end." Jack's blood ran cold. It had been a trap from the start. Alina, the princess he had risked everything for, was now part of that trap. She was caught between duty and love, between her father's empire and the man she had come to care for. "I'm sorry, Jack," Alina whispered, her voice trembling. "But there's nothing more I can do. The king has promised to spare your life if you leave. It's the only way. You have to go." Jack's fists clenched. This was it. His heart told him to fight, to resist, to break free from the king's control. But everything was spinning, and he felt the bitter taste of betrayal in his mouth. Had she never been on his side? Or had her hands been tied from the very beginning? But then, something inside him shifted. Alina was not his enemy. The real enemy was the king. And Jack would never back down, not when the person he loved was in danger. He had come to this world to fight for freedom, and if Alina couldn't help him from the inside, he would have to fight his way through. Without another word, Jack pushed past Draxon, charging at the door. He didn't know what his next move would be, but he knew one thing: he would never run from a fight, no matter the cost. A new beginning. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he stormed past Draxon, his hand gripping the cold stone of the door. The room behind him was silent, except for the soft echo of his footsteps. Alina's voice still lingered in the air, the weight of her words heavy on his conscience. "You have to leave, Jack." But he couldn't. Not now. Not when everything he had fought for was teetering on the edge of collapse. The palace that had seemed so majestic, so full of promise when he first entered, now felt like a gilded cage, an empire built on lies, manipulation, and betrayal. Jack made his way down the dimly lit corridors of the palace, his mind racing. The princess. Alina. Was she really the one who had betrayed him? Or had she been forced into a corner, trapped by her father's schemes? He didn't know, but he had to find out. He couldn't let her go so easily, not after everything they had shared. As he turned the corner, a familiar voice stopped him in his tracks. "Jack, wait." It was Alina. She stood there, her figure illuminated by the dim light, her face a mixture of worry and determination. She had followed him. "I told you to leave," she said, her voice quieter now, more urgent. "But I see it in your eyes, you're not going anywhere, are you?" Jack shook his head, his jaw clenched. "I'm not running anymore, Alina. I came here to fight for you. I'm not going to just walk away. Your father has used both of us for too long. It's time we do something about it." Alina's gaze softened, but there was still a lingering sadness in her eyes. "You don't understand. The king, my father, doesn't just rule with force. He controls everything, every part of this empire. And now, because of you, I've become a target. If we don't end this now, it will destroy us both." Jack took a step closer, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Then we'll end it together. I didn't come here to lose you. I didn't come here to be a pawn in his game. If we have to fight, we'll fight. We don't have to do this alone." For a long moment, Alina didn't speak. The tension between them hung thick in the air. And then, slowly, she nodded. "You're right," she said, her voice steady but laced with resolve. "This isn't just about me. It's about everything, the future of the galaxy, the people who have been oppressed by my father's reign. We can't let him keep controlling everything, not anymore." Jack felt a sense of clarity wash over him. They weren't alone. And he didn't have to carry this burden on his own. Together, they could stop the king's rule and bring the galaxy a new future, one where freedom and justice ruled, not fear and control. Alina stepped forward, a glint of determination in her eyes. "But we can't just face the king openly. He'll crush us. We need allies, people who are ready to rise up against him. I know there are factions out there, rebels, who've been watching the king's rule from the shadows. They'll help us." Jack nodded. "Then we find them. We show them what we can do. We fight back, together. For the first time since arriving on this strange planet, Jack felt a flicker of hope. The palace that had seemed so imposing, so full of danger, now felt like the first battleground in a war that would change everything. We'll need to act fast, Alina said, glancing nervously down the hallway. The king will be looking for you, for both of us. He'll do anything to stop us. Jack's mind raced with plans, but one thing was certain, they couldn't do it alone. The fight ahead would take every ounce of strength they had, and more. But the more Jack thought about it, the more he realized something. This wasn't just about fighting for Alina's freedom anymore. It was about freedom for everyone. Together, they left the palace under the cover of night. The guards were distracted, the king unaware of their plans. Jack and Alina navigated through secret passages, their steps light but purposeful. They had one goal now, to find the allies they needed to bring down King Zoran's empire. As they reached the outer gates of the palace, Jack paused. He looked back at the towering walls, the golden spires that had once represented power and grandeur. They no longer held the same meaning for him. This wasn't a place of strength. It was a place of tyranny. And he was about to change everything. This is it, Jack said, his voice filled with a quiet determination. This is where it all begins. Alina nodded, her eyes locked on the horizon, where the first light of dawn was beginning to break through the darkness. The world was waking up, and so were they. They were no longer pawns in someone else's game. They were the future. Together, they would rise. Together, they would fight for a new galaxy, one free from the rule of a tyrant.